Nice. I got the good video from Facebook. I already started one and it gave me too much height above my head. It gave me that crappy 4:3 instead of the sweet 16:9. 16:9. Vastly superior to 16:12. That's 4:3 for the non-math nerds. You're a nerd, but you're not a math nerd. Click here. Show me my live video, please. Thank you. Bring it up. Just going to make sure that we've got it all going. Looks like it's all happening. Just going to mute this. And all right, we're set. I'll move you over here. I've got the fun camera angle. It's all good. Happy Friday, everyone. Nice to settle smoothly into the weekend with a bit of a live show. I'm very excited today because we have a ton of awesome topics that have been supplied by our super generous audience. So big thank you to everyone that posts a question or a topic, something you'd like to hear me talk about throughout the week. It's such a gift to me. It really is, and I'm really grateful. So specifically, I want to give some shout outs before we start to Bishal, Manu, America, Faison, America the person, but also the country. You go, America. You're great. Seth, Corey. Seth is especially generous. Seth keeps sending me topics throughout the week. It's a nonstop feed, and I am delighted by it. So big thank yous to all of you that have done that. It really it makes these shows exciting for me to look forward to, and I hope that it makes it really interesting for people listening. Before we go to those, I'll share briefly what's been up for me. And what's been up has been largely sadness and heartbreak this week. So before you go, I'll share a little bit more about that. One of the things I've shared in the past that I took with me last time I went and sat with the medicine with ayahuasca was a desire to really take on my gluttony. My gluttony shows up in the form of I tend to just consume a lot. I stimulate myself a lot. So I play a lot of video games. I watch a lot of TV. I've always got a podcast in my ears no matter what I'm doing. I love junk food and I eat a bunch of it, a lot of candy, a lot of that sort of stuff. I when I'm drinking, I drink a lot. I drink a lot of coffee. It's just constant stimulation. And so I brought that to the medicine and she showed me a bunch. She showed me like my inability to sit in presence. And she showed me how I've become this man who's very restless, who can't just sit in the moment, but has to like add to the moment constantly. And so one of the things the medicine does largely is it creates awareness. And in the lineage of the medicine, we say 50% of the work is in the room, in the temple, when you're working with the medicine, but an entire 50% of that work is outside of it once you go back into your life. And so one of the practices I've really taken on over the past month has been, hi Jamie, nice to see you, has been letting go of those things. So I've not been drinking for the last month. Um, I've not drunken any caffeine, not even black tea, which would normally be something I'd have. I've eaten very little junk food, like a single piece of chocolate each night, but that's it. Hey Michelle, hey Daniel. Yes, very tropical. You got to go Hawaiian. As the weather increases, we gotta get more Hawaiian shirts. I think there's going to be big money in that. I've really scaled back the amount of video games I play. I largely have stopped listening to podcasts. Not That's not a forever sort of abstain from, but for right now in my practice, that feels really good. It means that I'm just brought more into presence. I put music on more. So there's a lot of taking away of the things that I stimulate myself with. And in a way, what I'm doing is I'm I wrote about this earlier this week. I'm losing weight. I'm I'm taking away from my obesity. My obesity was an energetic one. So I don't physically look fat, but I've been quite fat in terms of my energetics. And and when we're fat that way, when we're spiritually or energetically fat, and I recognize some people have that word might be a bit of a trigger, but I'm going to use it anyhow because I think it's appropriate to my experience of myself. When we're like that, it's harder, we're more insulated from the world. And so we don't feel as much. We're more insulated from ourselves. We're more insulated from the world around us. We're more insulated from life, and we're more insulated from spirit. And so as I've removed these things, there's less and less insulation between me and what I'm feeling and what I'm around. And so how that's like what I've come present to this week largely has been like just a lot of sadness and heartbreak in my life, in my experience of life. And uh, this is the place often where people want to like help me out of the goodness of their heart, out of love and compassion. And usually the way we want to help someone is by fixing them or giving them advice or like maybe consider this, maybe what's going on is this, because then you could figure that out and then your sadness and heartbreak would move on. And all of that is done from a very beautiful, kind, loving, compassionate place, and it's not at all what I need. I'm very clear on what there is for me, what really will benefit me. And this has come out of like a lot of conversations with the medicine, a lot of conversations with my coach. And what that is to just be with what's showing up, just to allow that to be there and not to make sadness or heartbreak bad in any way, not to create a story about it that it shouldn't be there. Well, I'm sad because this, and if this wasn't here, then I wouldn't be sad, and then things would be good. That's how we show up as humans, is that we create a story around how we're feeling and then we make it, oh, I shouldn't be here. Instead, it's just that's the phase I'm currently in. That's the season that's moving through me. So it's been a challenging week because I'm not like historically how I learned to be. Um, I like what you wrote, Jamie. Jamie writes, happy that you are feeling your sadness, Adam. Thanks, Jamie. Historically, for me, if you asked me like how often are you sad or anything, I would say I don't have time for sadness. I'm never sad. I'm never sad. The truth was I was often quite sad. I was completely cut off from it. I had no feeling of it. And so what happens when we can't feel our emotions is we become flooded with them. They back up. We become emotionally constipated. And so this stuff is flowing through me. It's being allowed to be felt and to be experienced, and that's allowing it to start to flow again, like a river that's been dammed for many, many, many years. So, is there anything else I want to add about that part? Mm, No, not really. It's a challenging practice for me. I've um, I've really I've really wanted to reach for a beer or drink a cup of coffee. This is decaf or whatever, like just anything to not feel. And then I keep, as I tap into my intuition, I can tell like, nope, just set that down. I'll be playing video games and I'm like more, and then I'm like, no, I'm not enjoying this that much right now. And I can tell what there is to do is to just go sit outside for a bit. So that's been the practice largely. Okay, well, let's go to these topics. We got rad topics. I don't have too much more to add to that, although I'm happy to answer questions. I don't want to jump over it and avoid, I'm not trying to avoid it, but I also I want to get to the juicy topics that y'all have been so generous to provide. Which ones did I say I was going to talk about? Oh, I know what I need to do. I need to go down here. I need to open up you in a separate tab. Now we're talking. So let's talk first. Bishal Sarkar says, Adam, can you talk about your meditation practice? And I'm going to start there because it ties in with what I've just been sharing. Um, hey, Seth, happy Friday morning. So Bishal doesn't give me any details. He just said, oh, hey, Bishal, nice to see you here. Let me know, Bishal, if I'm saying your name wrong. That's the first most important thing. And if so, please tell me how to pronounce it. And two, if there's anything specific you would like me to speak to about my meditation. I'm just going to freestyle it. So meditation for me has been this interesting journey where for the longest time it existed as like something I should do. Bishal. Am I saying it right? Bishal? Or is it Bishal? I think I'm on the right path. So meditation, for most of us that have busy lives, of which I was one, meditation is like the thing you're supposed to do. And so I'll sit down and I'm going to do it because I'm supposed to do it. And when you're doing something because you're supposed to do it, it's not that good in my experience. Whenever we're doing something because we're supposed to do it, we're doing it because we want a particular outcome. So it's hard to enjoy or appreciate the thing itself, especially when the outcome's not coming as fast as we think it should. Then we get frustrated with this thing, it's not working, we throw it out. So, so that was initially how meditation existed. And then during my first year of law school, which would have been about 14, 15 years ago, I started listening to the audiobook Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, which I highly recommend. It's a phenomenal book. It's replete with wisdom, and it's read by Peter Coyote, who's a fantastic audiobook reader. I love his voice. Really, really great book. And that really got me kind of intrigued again, less for like, well, part of that, what that book speaks to is like we want to meditate without any intention of gaining something. We don't want to sit in practice, meditation, meditative practice, with the idea that if I do this, then this will come, because that ruins the process. And so that really that enrolled me in the idea of just sitting. And so I've practiced on and off for about 15 years. And the thing about it is that some people are like, oh, I love my meditation practice, or I love meditating. It's so good for me. And a little part of me is like, well, fuck you, because I don't have that experience. I don't usually come out of meditation feeling like alive or boldened. What happens is I sit and I breathe and I sit as long as it takes for my mind to calm down, and then I get up and I go about my day. So it's like a 10-minute, 15-minute, sometimes 20-minute kind of reprieve. But there's no lightning bolt of awareness. There's rarely like a deep vision or anything like that. But what I notice is that my life seems to be when the times when my life is going well, I'm usually meditating. And the times when my life is going not so well, I'm usually not meditating. So I don't know if that's a causative relationship or simply correlative. Like maybe when I'm feeling good, I tend to meditate more. I don't know. But I recognize there's like a pairing there. And I also recognize that my meditation practice tends to be a bit of a bellwether for me. It's a good diagnostic. Am I meditating? Things probably are a little bit off the rails for me right now. And that's one way that I can start to bring them back a little bit. And it also brings me more into connection with my breath. It has me slow down for 10 minutes in the morning, which is never a bad thing for me. And I like the peace. Over time, I've come to really appreciate the peace that it provides me. Um, I really wish I had the sort of spiritual experience that a lot of people seem to have or report having through meditation or prayer, but that just doesn't seem to be my way. Spirit often speaks to me very quietly as a whisper. And so the practices I take on, like meditation, the practice that engage me with spirit, like sitting and praying, asking myself, um, what am I called to do in this moment? All of these sort of things. It rarely feels like God reaching down and speaking to me. It feels like my voice, like it almost occurs like just my own thoughts speaking back to me. Ultimately, like maybe you could say my higher self if I'm feeling empowered about the practice, but other times it's just my thoughts, and that's okay. You know, part of my meditative practice is in empowering that. That's what it's like for me. That's how my spiritual experience shows up. It's kind of like a dialogue with myself. And this is very similar to when I sit in ayahuasca. One of the types of experiences you can have in ayahuasca is called a consulta. There's pinta, which are your visions. There's the body experience, which is feeling something in your body. And this is the consulta. The consulta is like an experience where you are in a dialogue with spirit, God, your dog, a mineral, or, as is often the case for me, yourself. And so I will sit, I will drink, and I will start to ask for this wisdom from the medicine. And it just sounds, the way it occurs is I'll be like, oh man, what is causing all my gluttony? And then the next thought I have will be my own thought, and it'll be like, well, it's that you're trying to like not feel something, Adam. And the challenge for me in that is it's very easy to dismiss. It's just my fucking thoughts. They're constantly saying a bunch of nonsense. Why would I trust them in this moment as opposed to? And it'd be so nice if it was just like the clouds parted and Zeus rode down on a lightning chariot and he hit me in the head with Thor's hammer and all of that stuff. It sounds like, Jamie, you have a very similar experience. But that's not what happens. And that's not my path. My path is to experience spirit the way she shows up with me, and this is the way she shows up with me. So a lot of my meditation practice is really it's me generating it. It's me practicing it a ton of trust and kind of turning over, basically surrendering to the opportunity of the practice as opposed to the dialogue of my mind. Because my mind is like, is this doing anything? What a bunch of bullshit. How much longer do I have to sit here? Is this really doing anything? Can you prove that this makes a difference? How do you know that all of that stuff? My mind's just constantly going on. If you guys think I talk a lot, you should hear what it's like in here. It's exhausting. So that's how it is. That's how meditation occurs for me. That's how my work with plant medicine occurs for me as well, and often a lot of my work with my coach too. So thanks, Bishal. Thanks for asking that question. It's a great one. Okay. Let's go to Corey has a question. So Corey says, shout outs to Corey. He says, I'm taking a Gestalt, I think that's how you say it, Gestalt coaching course through one of the networks I belong to, and I'm finding similarities with that approach and how we work in ontologically. Where I'm feeling challenged with the Gestalt approach is that when supporting what is really showing up for the client, it can feel at odds with structuring a session around what the clients want to leave the session with. So what I'd love to hear you talk about is, when dealing with what is showing up, does that take priority over ensuring the coaching session has the structure of the client naming what he or she wants and moving towards it? So as an example, imagine in coaching, typically one of the things we teach in the Forge and that I've been taught, we call coaching for dummies and super smart people. So you don't have to be dumb to take advantage of this. Super smart people like it too. There's 4 requirements for any coaching conversation. And if you're missing these requirements, it's hard to have a coaching. You're probably not. So the first is we have to know where the person is. Where is this person in their life? So if the person wants support to create a different relationship with money, we need to know what is so with their money. That's like looking at a map. You need to know where you are on the map. Otherwise, the map's useless. It looks nice, but it's like, I don't know I can't orient myself. So first we have to know where the person is. Second, we have to know, where do they want to get to from there? Where do you want to go? That's the thing that Corey's talking about. I'm going to bring this in, but like, where do you want to get to in this session? In this conversation with me, what outcome do you want to achieve? Once we have those 2 things, we need to know what's the gap between these 2. So if you have $0 in your bank account and you want to make $10,000 in your bank account, great. What do you feel is in the way of that? We need to know what is it that you are a paraplegic and can't work? Or is it that you believe you're lazy and you just refuse to go and pick up jobs? Or is it that you believe the only way you can make $10,000 is by winning the lottery and you don't seem to be winning the lottery? Whatever, but that's the gap. And once we have those 3 elements, then step 4, we coach so as to close the gap, to bring you from where you are to where you want to be. So that's ultimately the arc of any coaching conversation, as well as like our journey from where we start to the place we want to end up along any project we're working on. So for example, Bray and I are planning renovations on our house. We want to put a second story on this house. The first thing that we need is the plans for our house. Where are we at? What is the structure of the house? What are the foundation that we're sitting on? We need to know that, otherwise we can't build it. Second, we need to know, what do we want to actually create? What's our wish list? Third, what's the gap between those 2 things? What is in the way of having that second story bedroom put up? Well, we're probably going to have to reinforce the walls. Okay, got it. So that's one of the things in the gap, and so on and so forth. And then we work with the people, we hire the people, we bring in contractors so as to close the gap. So this isn't unique to coaching. What's unique is that in coaching, we distinguish those things and we kind of stand for their necessity. And this is also a requirement for anything you want to create in life. You need to know where you are, you need to know where you want to go to, and you need to know what's in the way, and then you need to move those things out of the way. It's just that in life, we don't have much rigor in a lot of areas of our life, and as a result, we can kind of almost get away with, we're a bit oblivious to the need for these things, and as a result, we tend to not create the results we want with the velocity that we desire. Okay, I've laid all that out. Let's all take a breath. Let's have a sip of coffee. Whew. This guy wears Hawaiian shirts and he talks a lot. So Corey is now asking a question. which is in any coaching conversation, we basically create the same steps. We're like, where are you currently? Where do you want to get to by the end of this coaching conversation? What's the gap between those two things? Great. Let's have the conversation that's going to close that gap, move you in that direction. And the Gestalt approach that Corey is talking about, I believe, because I'm not taking his training, but I have a pretty good sense of what this is, might be something like you get on the call with a client and you say, what do you want? And they say, oh, I am overwhelmed and I have no idea. I can't even think about that. And so in a Gestalt kind of coaching experience, or whatever we might call it, the thing to do is like, oh, got it. Where the client is overwhelmed and they have no idea where they want to go. That's what we work with. We meet them exactly where they are. And this is where there's like nuance to this, because if we are holding this thing rigidly, we might be like, okay, got it. You're overwhelmed. You don't know where you want to go, but where do you want to go? And then we just doggedly stay attached to this idea. We have to get clear on that. We can't move forward until we have that. But in actuality, to coach masterfully, we have to be able to dance with what's showing up. And so if your client shows up and is sort of like, I'm overwhelmed and I don't know at all what it is I want, then we have to address that in order to support the client figuring out what they want. So it's not that we're throwing this step 2, what do they want, into the garbage and ignoring it completely. It's that we're like, oh, got it. So where they're at is overwhelmed and have no idea what they want. And so we have to support them there so as to be able to have them distinguish where they want to get to. So it's kind of like each of these steps you can kind of zoom into, and then there's a new iteration of where's the client, where do they want to get to, how do we close that? And then you kind of zoom back out and you're like, okay, got it. We've dealt with the overwhelm. Now, where do you think you might want to get to? Great. Now we can move towards that. So people often think, oh, there's a conflict here, because in this approach of trying to figure out where someone wants to get to, that's in conflict with just meeting them where they're at. But it's actually not. It's more that we can zoom in as much as we need to do, and then like address that issue, and then we can zoom back out and be like, okay, we've moved that thing out of the way that was blocking us from getting clear on what you want. What do you want now? So that's the artistry of this. It's learning to see, as you get deeper and deeper into this work, you start to see like, oh, there's not a lot of the things that are perceived conflicts aren't perceived conflicts. They're simply a lack of depth. They're a lack of seeing the whole totality of the picture and being able to work with it all. So I don't think those things are in conflict, really, Corey. I would say if your client can't can't describe what they want, then the thing is to do is to like look at where the person is in this microcosm is in a conversation where they want to figure out what they want and they're struggling. What's the gap there? And then so you go into it. Oh, I'm super overwhelmed. Okay, great. How do we close that gap? How do we support those people to move beyond their overwhelm? This is not exclusive to coaching, because those 4 steps are not exclusive to coaching. Anyone that wants to support anyone to show up more as a leader and more transformationally would benefit from following these kind of steps. What I do think is problematic is that a lot of these approaches throw out, because of this perceived conflict, they end up choosing one or the other, and then they throw out that structure entirely. So they say, all we do is meet the client where they're at. And every week the client shows up and we meet the client where they're at. And that tends to be a lot like therapeutic work, where because there's no forward focused future, there's no kind of what are we aiming to go towards, the conversation tends to be, the metaphor I like to use is like playing billiards pool on a table with no holes. So you hit the balls and they move around and stuff shifts. It's a new orientation, but what are we going towards? And eventually people just go, I don't know why I would keep doing this. It feels kind of good. It's kind of satisfying to move the balls around the table, but why? To what end? And so that's part of when they throw that out and only ever meet the client where they're at without providing any kind of structure, you lose all of the rigor. And then we don't tend to move forward in our lives. And that tends to be the point where we start to shrug our shoulders and be like, well, you're awesome and you're a great coach, but I'm going to move on. So don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Okay. So that's what's showing up versus what you want. Uh, Next, we've got a topic here from my man Seth. Seth, thank you for your topics. So Seth says, I've been thinking a lot lately about where I draw the line between coaching and friendship. I'm finding with my newfound ontological knowledge that I can see the shadows of my friends much more clearly. I now sometimes feel a burden to be around them and still hold my stances, but I am committed to those stances. My instinct is to try and stand for my friends when I see shadow to help them grow. I know that if I just console them and only be a good friend, I will provide excuses that hurt them in the long run. If you have a friend who experienced something difficult, but you can see how their being played a larger role, how do you decide how much to provide comfort versus standing for how they created the situation with their being? So the first piece of advice I would give you is don't do what I did. I can super relate to this, and I think every coach can. When you first start to get trained, you start to see a little bit more of like the entirety of the iceberg. And you start to see stuff that other people can't even see in themselves because we just can't. We can't see our own blind spots. That's inherently impossible. Some people are like, not me, I figured it out. It's like, it's called a blind spot. If you can see it, it's not a blind spot. It's not a blind spot, what you think you can see. And further, your insistence that you figured it out, that's part of your blind spot. That has you stop trying to get supported to see something you can't otherwise see. Anyhow, not the point, not the question. So when I first got into this, I was a mess and just terrible to be around. I was like pointing to people's survival mechanism, pointing to their shadows. Someone, I'd be like, why don't we do this? And they'd be like, I don't really feel like doing it. And I'd be like, you never feel like doing stuff. And it's because blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. And all of that is super fucking obnoxious. It's not, it's, it's very obtrusive and intrusive. And what it is it's it's um it's permissionless. Like it's not honoring their sovereignty in any way, shape, or form. And the challenge for coaches here is when you start your work, you really feel like you've got something that's really important that you can give over to other people. You could help them make their lives different. But what's missing is that we don't realize how much of our own blind spots are still showing up. And we think, no, 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 I can really see their shadow over there and I need to do something. And Seth, I can see you say like, I'm going to hurt them in the long run if I just be a good friend. I need to support them this way. There's like, I can feel a bit of a neediness in this. And the truth is that's your stuff. That's your shadow. So ultimately, the place that we are striving to arrive at in this profession as coaches and leaders is a place where we don't have any need for people to shift whatsoever. I can to some extent with support. I can sit in a conversation with a client over the course of a year and have them not change. And my job, because of the agreement we formed with that client, is just to say, hey, what I notice is happening is you're showing up to the conversation, you're creating need awareness, but nothing's changing in your life. Is that how you want it to go? So in that conversation, because I've got agreements with those clients, I can reflect that to them. And if they say, no, I don't think that's the case, then my job is to say, okay, what do you think is the case? Set aside what I think and get curious about what's going on for them and totally accept them, trust their truth. And then next week, if I see the same thing, to reflect it again. And if they say, no, it's totally not, set aside what I think, trust them in their truth. That requires a ton of work because we're humans. And as humans, we have judgments and we think people should be different and their shadows are annoying. Damn it. There's total truth in that. People's shadows are annoying. Mine are too. All of our shadows, they're annoying to be around. It's like an instrument that's flat or sharp on one note. Or like fingernails on a chalkboard. It does that to us. We're like, this is inauthentic. This feels phony. Stop pretending you're dumb. You're smart. It's annoying. Our job is to be okay with that. Our job is to learn through the process of working with our own coach and discovering our own blind spots and finding our way to compassion for that, none of which is an easy job, all of which takes a great amount of time and practice and love and compassion. And in doing that, we develop compassion for ourselves and we can start to see, man, I can't, like, it is really hard for me to see this stuff when it's happening. And further, if someone in the moment said, Adam, you're being inauthentic, I would say, fuck you. This is my authenticity. I wouldn't be able to see it anyhow, even if they just told me that. And so, yes, Bolty, shadows are really damn annoying. And hello, America. They just are. And it is divine work to develop that kind of compassion so that we can really love people exactly the way they're showing up, even and especially when they're in their shadows. So these days, I can still see a ton with my friends, probably more than I ever could before, but I set it all aside to the best of my ability. And when I can't, I bring it to my coach because our friends are sticky. They're almost like our longest friends are they kind of can push our buttons just about as good as our family. Not quite, but like second. They're second in ability to push our buttons because we've been with them forever and they've developed with us. The other thing that helps me a lot is recognizing when I see a shadow over there, there's probably one showing up over here that I'm not seeing. And so like that helps remind me this isn't the time to just blurt what I think is going on. And for the most part, I make my job with my friends like having a great time with them, loving those guys, hanging out with them, and accepting them exactly as they are. And that is a lot of work for me. That is a ton of my own work because I tend to be a pretty judgmental guy. And I don't, it's hard. It's not free for me to just accept people at face value. I got to do a lot of work to bring it to my coach, and she helps me see that's your own stuff, Adam. And if they ever were to be like, hey, I got something, can I run it by you? I would be like, hell yeah. And what I would make my priority, generally speaking, what I bring to them from my coaching is my ability to listen very deeply and to set aside my own stories and judgment. So one of the things I think I've become really good at with my friends is if something's going on, I can listen to them and give them a lot. I can hold a lot of space. And that's primarily the gift that comes through from my body of work is my ability to do that. The other thing that I think I can bring that I do bring to my friends is cleaning up the messes I've made. I'm pretty committed to that, and I think I'm pretty good at like, hey, I think I made a mess. I'd like to clean it up with you. Is that okay? My job is not to coach them. And further, my job is not to coach anyone that is not in a coaching relationship with me. I hold the way I relate to this sort of like ontological work is almost like it's like plutonium, or like I wish I had better metaphors, but like it's a really potent tool. And so I want to use it very like I want to hold it with a lot of reverence and sacredness. So early on, when we start this work, we don't really understand how powerful coaching is because we've not had the experience of coaching being powerful in our own lives, nor have we made the messes. But as you become more sophisticated and more skilled and you learn more about this stuff, you start to learn like, wow, this is not something to just throw around. Yeah, Michelle, you said it. With great power comes great responsibility. So all my clients will tell you when we start working together, our first call is an hour of going through agreements. Maybe not entirely an hour. We have fun, we talk, we do other stuff, but like largely that's what we do. And the reason for that is I want to set up a really powerful container for the powerful tool that we're going to be using. Direct reflection, speaking powerfully to one another, coaching, all of that stuff. So I don't really offer that to my friend. If they ask for it, it's on tap. They've got me. They don't want it. For the most part, my friends aren't interested in my coaching. They're interested in Adam's jokes and like my wittiness and my playfulness and the connection that I am and playing Magic the Gathering with me. That's what they're in relationship with me for. If they wanted a coach, they'd hire a coach. Very few of them do. It's all fine and good. So that's how I hold this, Seth. And I see you've asked a question. You say, what about in my relationship where the actions, are you talking about my relationship with my wife? Like, what about in my romantic relationship? Let me know, Seth, and then I'll come back and speak to that. Um, and Bishal is saying agreement versus expectation. Yes. I mean, that distinction is a good one. I'd love to hear you elaborate on that as opposed to just stating the distinction. I'm not totally clear if what you meant by that, but I agree it's a good distinction. And Jamie, I'm just going to read what you wrote, Jamie. Jamie shares, I ask my friends how they want me to show up for them. Do they want me to just listen or do they want some support? Yeah, that's a really great one. I coach my friends often because they like it and get value from it, but I have a gift of really being able to see people clearly and bring a lot of curiosity with them and just questioning. I actually really enjoy showing up as a coach, friend, and everything in between with every person I meet. It just depends on your rapport and asking them for what they need. Yeah, I I if my friends wanted coaching from me, I would so everyone does what they do. I would dissuade people from the path Jamie is talking about for a few reasons. Um, Generally so that we can be really clean in our practice. It doesn't mean that that's always the right way, but to really honor, like to hold sacred the relationship of friend and to hold sacred the relationship of coach. And I also find a lot of coaches coach their friends because that's safer and easier. Because if I can coach my friends and I don't fully have to notice the stuff that's driving me nuts, I can coach them instead. So at least for me, it's a bit of an off ramp. As long and possibly for you too, Seth. Like as long as if I'm coaching them, then they're going to change and then they won't be showing up in this annoying shadow way, and then things will be better. I can breathe because they're being coached by me, as opposed to, oh, how could I better love them exactly as they are? And in my experience, when I love people exactly as they are, I then have less of a need for them to change, and that gives them the space in which they can change or stay the same. They actually energetically experience a freedom instead of a push. One of the one of the demonstrations or whatever they do in Tony Robbins events, they hold your hands up and then the person pushes. And then so of course, when they're pushing at you, you push back. And so the thing, being shown there is like anytime we're pushed, we feel a desire to push back. And that's what happens when we're trying to change people because they haven't actually asked for it, or when they haven't asked for it. They have a natural resistance to us. And like Jamie said, you can always ask people too. Are you wanting my support as coach? Are you wanting me to be your friend in this? What do you want here? So for me, I find important to my sovereignty is really having clean lines, and important to my integrity because then I'm clear. So there are times when like if a friend said, "Hey, can you coach me on this?" I would be like 100%, and I would set up a container for it. And then once we were done that, I would be back in friend. And what that does for me is it allows me to be maximally powerful because I've set up a clear, bright set of lines around the container. Bishal, the first call with the client is about setting agreements versus expectations that will show up a certain way. Yes, absolutely. Seth, like when your wife has a shadow that's impacting you in a way that you don't like. Well, that happens every single day. We got in a fight yesterday just in the middle of practice. We were sitting down practicing sacred intimacy, the yoga that we practice together every morning, most mornings. And I got upset because I felt she wasn't showing up to the practice, and she was upset because of how I was showing up. And um, the thing I'm really clear after a decade and plus of being in this work is that it doesn't matter how much I think I can see my wife's shadows. It doesn't matter how much I think I'm right about what I can point to. It won't make the difference I want it to. It just won't. And I've tried this. I've got empirical data, 10 years of this. And the best I can do, I've learned to get more artful with this as time goes on. And the best I can do is really like, my love, I think that there was something that might really benefit you, and that would be coming and drinking ayahuasca with me, for example. But as soon as there's like a push or a need or a pull from me, it won't work. It'll fall to pieces. And for the most part, the gift of my coach is that every time I bring something to her and I'm like, oh, baby's doing this, and I know it's her stuff, is my coach helps me come back to seeing my role in that so that I can work on the one thing, the one person I can change, which is this guy. So I see stuff, of course I do, but I really work to set it aside and just come back to a place of like unconditional love with my partner. And that lasts for 10 minutes, and then I see something new. It's just, it's an ongoing cycle. Um, okay. Anything else I want to say on that? Mm. Bay comes and drinks medicine. She comes in and drinks ayahuasca. She works at Rhythmia with me. She's a member of the medicine team, so she supports people throughout the night of ceremony. And when I first ever went down to Rhythmia, I had this vision. The medicine showed me this vision, and what she said to me through my own thoughts was, Adam, this is your work. This is the same work you do with your clients is happening here through this magical medicine called ayahuasca. Two, this is part of your path, and you're going to, over time, start bringing your art here to Rhythmia. Three, Bay is going to be a part of that too. So I came home freaking nuts. I was bonkers as shit about that. I was like, oh my God, I think I'm meant to be a shaman and I'm scared, but I'm excited and ah. And I was like, Bay, you're going to join me and you're going to drink the medicine with me. And I like bought her quite some beautiful like beaded necklaces and stuff from the place. And that landed on her like this big push. And she reacted the way most of us would react from that. First of all, who the fuck is this crazy person and what happened in the jungle while he was doing drugs? That's not my story, but that was probably one of the most obvious places she might land from how I was showing up. Two, this guy's practically foaming at the mouth. Three, and he's telling me I'm going to do this too? Hell no. Hell no. Push back. And so that was how it was for 2 years of COVID. We came back 9 months later, COVID struck, and then I didn't go back and drink for 2 years. And then I went back. And I went back and I again got the same message. But this time it was a little more grounded, a little more sober. I was able to hold it. I could hold that energy, that vision a little more powerfully. And I came back and I shared with her, like I was very clear. I was very clear. I said, my love, I'm very clear you're going to come and do this work with me. And I have no need for that to become the reality. Like, I want you to know I'm not going to push you. I'm not going to make this happen. There's nothing that I'm going to force on you. And I'm also okay if this doesn't ever actually come to fruition. If it's not this lifetime, I'm okay with that too. But I just want to share with you that I really feel like at some point you're going to come and do this with me. And then, but a few minutes later, she said, I think I might actually be ready. And so I attribute, one, who I was being in that moment, well, largely who I was being in that moment, both in terms of the work I'd done internally, but also how I was showing up with her. And it was that surrendering of my attachment to her coming and just giving it to her like a gift and letting her sit in that. That's what created the space in which she could choose in. As long as I'm pulling her, she's not got the opportunity to choose in. It's either acquiesce to Adam or hold my ground. So this is just another example of what we're talking about, right? As soon as we're trying to change people, they don't have the choice to make that change themselves. And at best, what you're going to get is they're going to come along for the ride because you're trying to force them to it. Not really great. Hey, Vera, long time no see. Vera says, wow, this is a really great conversation. Thanks. I really choose to totally separate these paths. Friendship, just having fun together, sharing common interests versus coaching, which is for me work and lies in the domain of professional activity. I tell people I'm a coach very rarely, only when I get asked about what I do. I love that. Yeah. Me as well, Vera. And I think I have a friend. No, I'm not going to talk about him. I don't want to go there. But I think when people often ask, I have a friend and they just wouldn't trust another coach, and that's why I coach them. I say the response I have for those people is, well, why aren't you standing for the possibility of coaching for these people? Like, support them to trust another coach, enroll them in the possibility of coaching. Like at that point, it's really interesting because the coach thinks that they're standing for the person's highest and greatest self, but the coach is actually limiting they're buying into the person's context. Oh yeah, you're right. You would never trust anyone like that. That's actually the antithesis of transformational work. And so I advocate, generally speaking, for people just to draw clean lines, and often you'll be grateful. It doesn't mean you can't support your friends, as Jamie's describing, but I think having clean lines is very healing for us. It supports our boundaries, it supports our sovereignty, it supports us to really own the majesty of the work and the value that we have to offer in each domain of our life. It'd be really beautiful. Thanks for sharing that, Vera. And Jamie's saying we get to release our partner needing to change. This has been my practice too with my partner. Hail Yair. Hey, Darren. And Seth says, I've had friends and family engage with me more as long as I'm being more accepting and open. Yeah. Last thing I'm going to share on this is I was talking with a shaman I work with down south, and she was sharing about she was going off to spend time with her family. She was really excited, and I was asking like, "Does your family drink?" And she's like, "Some do, but I don't push it on them at all. I don't even talk about it. If they ask, I talk, but I don't talk about it otherwise because when I first started, I was so bad. I created such a mess. I did it so poorly. So now I just honor them exactly as they are. And if they want to talk about it, I'll talk about it. And that's basically how I hold this work too. If my friends want to talk about it, I will talk about it. But otherwise, I'm just going to honor them. And they're worthy of being honored. My friends are amazing human beings. I love them each very dearly. Hey, Sarah, nice to see you. Sarah saying, wonderful reminder, especially at the stage I'm at in my personal journey. Yes, indeed. Thanks, Seth. Awesome question. I really acknowledge you for like putting it out there, for asking what there was to ask and being open to an answer you may not possibly love. Okay, Faison. Faison, thank you for your question. Or Faison says, just can you talk about when you put out stuff in the world and no one sees it, responds to it, or the social media algorithm gods don't disseminate your piece for whatever reason? Fuck that shit. That's what I have to say about that. It stings me greatly. I don't have a piece of inspiration on this topic. What I have is, I guess, a vulnerable maybe or an authentic share, which is like, it's really hard. I lately have not felt super inspired to write. And part of the way that's shown up is I just haven't been willing to get up when my alarm goes off in the morning. Or I get up and I sit at my desk and I'm like, I think I'm going to go play Street Fighter instead of sitting here and being in a writing practice. And so I've got some stuff set up so I can post some evergreen stuff. There's still stuff I share out, but by and large, I'm not creating new writing. I'm not generating. And so a couple things happen with that. One is the algorithm ranks me down. So my stuff gets seen less. And when I share it, I get a few likes, not a lot of comments. And that is kind of devastating for me because I like to be seen. Part of my essence is presence. And people with this essence, we like to be noticed. And so when I share stuff and people don't respond, comment, whatever, there's nothing cosmically wrong about that. But I perceive it as wrong. And the way it lands with me is I'm losing relevance. I'm falling behind. I was doing pretty good, but now I'm starting to fall behind. And then the pack will move forward and then I'll evolve beyond where I'm at. And then I'll just be the last person on Facebook trying to create clients writing posts on Facebook. Some story like that. And so it generates fear for me. When I post stuff that I think is good and it doesn't get much of a response, I start to get a bit scared. And from my fear sounds like what I just shared. You're falling behind. You're not going to stay relevant. You're already irrelevant. You're going to lose all your clients. And then you're going to, I don't know, have to become a lawyer or like, it doesn't even go, it doesn't get that distinguished. Eventually it just becomes like, doom, black clouds, smoke, doom is written on the screen of my mind. And so let's drink some coffee. The work there, I brought this to my coach yesterday and I shared like I'm overwhelmed. I can't seem to get myself to do anything. I don't feel very motivated. And she shared, okay, totally got that. Why don't we start just by looking at the part of you that is like, that feel like the story you have that where you are is wrong? Because there might be something to do next, but as long as you've got this belief that where you are is wrong and shouldn't be, you're basically going to be reacting to that story. And so that is that's the work for me. My fear is like, are you fucking kidding? I don't have time for that. I got to write a bunch of posts so that I can get a bunch of clients so that I'm set for the next 5 years so that then, all in reaction to that fear. And Michelle, it's decaf coffee. It's decaf coffee, and I've also got decaf Earl Grey here. So I'm not drinking caffeine is ultimately what I'm not drinking. Or I'm just a straight up liar. Guys, this is filled to the brim with vodka. I'm not drinking alcohol. Do as I say, not as I do. Anyhow, doom. So the hard work is to let go of the grip of fear. Because the grip of fear says, fucking get busy, man. Wrench yourself out of bed and do the work. And that's really tough. And it's really like the fear is grippy. You've probably noticed its grippiness. It grips good. And so that good porn film name. And so I have to practice a lot of compassion with myself. I have to practice a lot of breathing and slowing down. And I practice a lot of trusting what my coach is pointing to, and then trusting the part of me that knows that like even before she said it, I knew that was true, but I kind of needed that reflection to have it fully like settle in for me. And so what I do is I start to like, this is very much in process for me, but like the arc of how this goes, because I've been here before, is I start to surrender needing a particular response. I start to surrender needing to write posts so as to get somewhere. I start to surrender a particular outcome that I'm trying to make happen through that action. And as I let all of that go, I stop needing to write or needing to post or needing to do whatever. And once I release that, there becomes the space in which I can become inspired by the act of doing it once again, because I no longer require it for anything. So again, right, I'm taking away the push. I'm no longer pushing myself, you have to do this. I'm giving myself the spaciousness. I can write or I can not write. And as that happens, my inspiration slowly shows back up. And then I can start to write, and I can do so from a surrendered place, free of any expectation that it's received any particular way. And that's when people start to resonate with my work again. That's when what I have to say starts to get noticed. And it's funny, it's the exact same thing in my practice. What up, Mia? Mama Mia is when I'm attached to clients, it's a slog and it's hard and I get frustrated about like, you know, how people are or are not showing up. And I tend not to get hired for a period of time. And then as I come to a point of surrender and like, you know what, whatever, if I don't get hired, I'm not going to get hired, and that'll be however it's going to be. We'll take that on as it comes on, and we'll let it. And when I allow that, that's when I start to show up the most powerfully for the people I'm talking to, because there's no need for them to be any different, and that's when they start to be a yes to this work with me. So it all sounds very easy, I think, as I'm laying it out, but it's not an easy experience for me. And right now I'm right at that part where I've only just distinguished, oh, this is the grippiness of fear. And what there's to do is to practice trusting and letting go and slowing down and breathing. Great question, Faison. And I see there's a follow-up here from you, Seth. You guys have been so awesome with it. I'm vibing on all of you. Thank you, everyone. It's lovely to see you, Andy. And Sir Leoin, how do I say your name? Sirloin. Top sirloin. Sir Leoin, thank you for your comment. America's just sharing, it's comforting to hear someone else's version of doom. Not that you have doom, but thank you for sharing. I get it. I totally get it. Seth, you write, what about if you have a stance to write? I'll come back to that. Sir Leoin, you're saying, I love that you were talking about your fear and where you are. Lol, porn name. You live authentically, which is attractive to my functionally inland approach to life and reminds me. Beautiful. Hey, Andy, nice. Andy's saying nice Buddhism. Yeah, I guess it is, right? Kind of accidental Buddhism. And Vera just saying, gosh, this is relatable. I just had to catch up with your lives tonight, my time zone. It's really great to see you show up on my feed, Vera. Again, I always love your being and what you put into the world. It's nice to have you here. So Seth, Charlene. Oh, wow, that's a cool way to spell Charlene. Oh, Irish Gaelic. Man, I love Irish Gaelic spellings. It's so cool. Okay, Seth, you say, what about if you have a stance to write? So this is part of what I'm learning to discern, because there's resistance and there's kind of willingness, for lack of a better term right now. Resistance is going to be there anytime you try to do anything different from what you're currently doing. So if I currently get up at 7 in the morning and go to bed at 11, I'm going to have resistance to getting up at 6:30. This is the law of the universe. Inertia is built into the universe, and we are of the universe. So inertia is built into us. And further, our thoughts, largely to the extent they're a function of our mind. There's an argument for like the spiritual connection that our thoughts represent, but we'll set that aside for now. Our thoughts are of this part of what's of the universe, and therefore they too have inertia. So everything we take on is going to have inertia as part of it. So anytime you start to create a stance to do anything, I'm going to make a practice of writing every day for 365 days of the year. If you're not already doing that, you're going to have some inertia to starting. That's resistance. That inertia shows up as resistance. So on the one side, there's just garden variety resistance. And on the other side, there's me trying to force myself to do something because I'm afraid of the consequences if I don't. Or put maybe a little more succinctly, I'm afraid there's a story I have and I'm trying to force myself to take action to overcome that story. That's different than just trying to overcome my resistance. It's having a stand to write every day, Seth, to your question, could fall into either of those categories. And so my work is to discern which of those two places am I in. Is this just that I have resistance to taking on something new and I just have to actually sit down and push through that resistance? Or have I created a stance to write every day because I'm trying to create an outcome because I'm afraid of this story that I have? And that path will never work. So we have to be in a little bit of discernment. Yeah, whether it's coming from fear or not. Am I doing this to try to fix something I'm afraid of, or am I doing this because I'm committed to something? And this is why I think having a coach is so great, because I can only, we can say these words, but I probably wouldn't have been able to distinguish a lot of this stuff until I'd sat with Rachel, my coach, and had this conversation and gotten a bit of altitude. So sometimes we just got to bring it to our coach and have them support us to see this with a little higher altitude. Okie dokie. Manu has a great question here that I want to speak to about judgment. So Manu says, can you talk about judgment? Can you talk about navigating internal judgment that's directed outwards and the fear of judgment directed towards oneself? Can you talk about navigating differences in worldviews and opinions within organizations and groups? And can you talk about sharing an authentic message in social media world that incentivizes provocative and inflammatory marketing? Man, that's a good topic. Let's see how I do. So the first thing we have to do is set aside our judgment about judgment. And that's not going to necessarily be easy because we've got a lot of story that judgment's wrong. But judgment's not wrong. It's inherent. Your eye judges black as a different color from white. That's a form of judgment. It's essential for our functioning. If we couldn't do that, we could never read a book unless we printed it like orange and blue or something. But then now you're judging between orange and blue. So I'm starting at the most fundamental form of judgment so we can get we kind of have to set aside our stories about what's right or what's good or what's bad. It's not super helpful. Great, 12 o'clock. So we want to come to a place of compassion for ourselves. We're going to have judgment. That's just part of what it is to be a human. What becomes problematic is when we start to make our judgments significant. So what I mean about that is I might see someone with their hair styled a particular way and dressed a particular way and make a judgment that they're a slob. That's just going to happen. And that judgment will be a function of my upbringing, how I was taught, the stories I've been inceptioned with, my beliefs, my own evidence of what I've noticed in the world, blah, 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 blah. The problem happens when I have that show up and then I start to act in alignment with that judgment rather than checking things out first, rather than getting a sense. It's not totally wrong. It's not like part of the way we become adults and function in this world is that we learn, we start to learn from the world and be able to make inductive decisions. Like inductive reasoning is sort of like, well, that and that and that all kind of showed up this way in the past. So this that looks similar to those things will probably show up a pretty similar way. So we're always navigating this. If we try to tell ourselves, I should just never have any judgment, you're going to throw all of that out and you're not really going to be able to function very well. And you're going to be dishonest with yourself because you're going to have judgments anyhow. So what we're working with here is not all judgments, but really more like fuck Republicans or fuck Democrats or whatever. All Americans are boastful jerks. all Canadians are snide, self-deprecating, arrogant pricks. I think you could maybe throw that at Canadians. I think like I'm not really trying to call my country to task, but I think one of the things you could throw at Canada is like we're very polite, we apologize a lot, we're very self-deprecating, but I think underneath that there's a little bit of arrogance. No, that's my sense. Maybe I'm just speaking about this guy. So what happens and what Manu is really talking about is like we show up in the world and the world shows up a particular way and then we have judgment about it. And then we want to change the world for the better. Changing the world for the better is a noble ideal and it's super important and valuable. So we don't want to set that aside. But what most of us do is we try to change the world. We try to take action from our negative judgment about the world. So I would be like, let me see if I can think of a good example while I switch over to tea here. Oh, right. Imagine someone sends me a letter and I feel that they were rude because they didn't say hello in the letter. They jumped right into asking me for something. And then at the end, they didn't say bye or anything. They just finished the letter. And I respond, and I feel like I've responded kind of kindly. Hey, no, I can't really do that. I hope you have good luck finding this thing, blah, blah, blah. And then they just respond and say, that's fine. And then that's all I hear from them. So in this instance, I might have a judgment about that person and be like, man, fuck you. You ask me for a favor. You don't even introduce yourself. You don't even say goodbye. There's no heart in any of what you've done. You ask me to spend my time doing something. I spend the time to write you a kind email back, and you just give me a 2-word reply. GFY, buddy. That'd be a very understandable place to come from, right? So I got a judgment about this person, and I've got some anger about how they've shown up. What I then want to do is write them a letter and be like, I need to tell this person how they showed up. I need to reflect their impact to them so that they can know the impact they're having in the world. That's an example that serves as a metaphor for how most change is attempted to be affected in the world. Most of the change that people are seeking to make happen in the world is done in that kind of reactive way I just described. It's like you people are polluting the oceans. Fuck you. Let's make a company, an organization, an NGO that like stops people polluting in the world and works to clean that up. And what we don't realize is that inherent in every message that comes out from that is that underlying fuck you. There's a fuck you in all that energy. So let's go back to that metaphor and then we're going to keep moving in and out of it. So I write that person that angry letter that I have where I'm like, hey, I want to just let you know your impact. It doesn't matter how artful I think I'm going to be. My fuck you is going to come through. That's the nature. You can't hide this stuff. We really believe we can. No, 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 Adam, you don't know me. I'm really good at this stuff. No, no, no. Trust me. I've been in this work for many, many years. I've worked with many, many leaders. You can't hide it. It comes through. And so that letter's going to land over there with that person like a fuck you. And it doesn't matter that you're telling yourself, I really want to help them see their impact. They're not going to see it because what they're going to get is your fuck you. And as soon as we get someone's fuck you, there's no hope of us looking inwards unless you're like highly committed to this work and like some crazy person that works with a coach and does all that stuff that's like, I'm going to find gold in every interaction. Those people are rare. And you probably wouldn't be sending them the letter. So the hard part here is that there's a truth that's shown up. This person is showing up. This person that wrote this request for a favor from me and then a 2-word response, there's a truth to how they're showing up and an impact they're having. But before I can reflect this, I have to come to terms with the fuck you inherent in my judgment. I have to come to terms with that. And I have to peel that away before I can give them this gold, if they even want it. And so that's the hard work because we get wrapped around that fuck you. And so what there is for us to do is to like peel this away, to get supported by our coach, to take this to like the person that supports us, our support structures, so we can see like, wow, there's a lot of my own story here. Wow, I show up the same way this person does in other places I'm not even aware of. And that's why I've got so much judgment about it, because I judge myself so harshly. And that's why it's hidden from me, because I judge it so much that I push it below the level of my consciousness where it can wreak havoc. So we have to see all that, and only then can we start to have compassion for ourselves, being that sort of, do me this favor, fine, fuck you, go away. And then we can start to be like, oh, wow, when I do that, this is what's going on. That might be what's going on with this person that I just got upset with. How would I best bring this message to that person? So that's the work. To your question, Manu, like, how do we work with our judgment? We have to like alleviate the fuck you inherent in it so that we can then get to the thing underneath it and hold it with grace. And this is why I believe so much of the DEI and DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging conversation is falling short of the mark. This is why I think a lot of LGBTQ plus sort of stuff goes off the rails. This is why I think a lot of like Republicans get up in arms about progressive, liberal, democratic things. And I want to be super clear here. I am staunchly in favor of DEIB, LGBTQ plus, democratic principles. I am highly in favor of that. I am fully bought into like raising our taxes and creating greater social safety nets and increasing different. I'm totally bought into all this. So I'm not saying those things are wrong. I'm saying that what happens is a lot of it happens over top of a fuck you. And I'm also not saying that anyone is wrong for the fuck you that's there, because that is hard to let go of. And a lot of the times the fuck you happens because someone else had an impact on us. What I'm here to sort of speak to is the fact that if we really want to create change, we kind of have to set aside our righteousness. And by which I mean just that I'm right to be fuck you. We have to set that aside. And what we have to ask ourselves is, am I more committed to being right about my fuck you, or am I more committed to changing this? Because those two things are different paths. They look pretty similar. They're kind of adjacent, and they look like they walk fairly close, but they start to fork and veer off. They're not fully parallel. And so this is hard. We can, but we must do our best to alleviate judgment from all of this stuff. We want to let people off the hook everywhere. What I mean by that is hold them with compassion. We want to really let people like, okay, got it. This person has a fuck you for the wrong that was visited upon them, and they're trying to right things from their fuck you. And it's probably not going to work the way they want, but they're doing their best right now. And if and when they ask me for support, this might be something that I would reflect to them. So challenging place to work with. And our job as leaders, where we are committed to something greater than ourselves, is to do that hard work to like basically to have people's stuff land on us, just like our stuff's going to land on other people. Like to get slimed by someone, fuck, that fucker slimed me. And then to get supported, to do our work, come back to a place of forgiveness, compassion, and love. And from there, then we can start to bring the conversation forward. It's a lot. And if there's anyone that's like, fuck that, I understand. None of this is like a should. It's not a thing you should be doing or a wrong for not doing or anything along those lines. Charlene says, how can you see you are showing up like looking in a mirror? How can you know that? Your perceptions are interesting, as we don't know all that they are presenting themselves with their own life. I'm going to try to translate that. I'm not sure I totally followed. So I think your question, Charlene, is when I have judgment of someone else and their shadow, their whatever, how can I see that that's actually a mirror for me? The easiest way is just to assume that's the case. Anytime we have energy that's up, that's a sign that that's our stuff. But Adam, like, surely not, because sometimes people could just be like, fuck you, and walk away. And that's just plain rude. And so that's not just my stuff. And I'd say, yeah, it is. It is, because there are people for which someone would be like, fuck you, and walk away. And the person would be like, that's fucking ridiculous. What the hell was that? It wouldn't really land on them because they're just like, that person's probably just having a bad day. It's no big deal. And as soon as it becomes like something we are hooked into, that's our energy. If we don't have energy around it, it just flows through us. You're giving me a little bit more. How can the person see they are showing up? How can I see how I'm showing up? This is really tough. This is why I work with a coach, because I know I can't see my blind spot, and I can get closer to seeing my blind. Like I can reduce the amount of range of my blind spots. I can broaden my peripheral by being really committed to like noticing where I'm charged and like, okay, what's here for me? What is the gold here? Oh, the gold is just avoid people like that. No, 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 Adam. That's a bit of a cop out. What is getting triggered internally for me? What about this is shining some light on something for me? So by doing that, we can start to reduce the size of our blind spots, but we're never going to reduce them entirely. And this is why coaching, I believe, will always have value. It will always have inherent value because it is inherent to have a blind spot. I'm going to show a video that everyone has probably seen by now called the awareness test. Boom, boom. I'm going to put it in the comments here. You can take a minute to watch this video. It's not a Rickroll, I promise. It's if you haven't seen it, it's really neat. And if you have seen it, don't ruin it for anyone. Don't comment underneath. It's not the point. But when people watch this video all the way through, one of the things I like to do is ask them like, so now that you've seen this, how would you like, if you were trying to like outsmart this, what would you do in the future? And people are like, oh, I would watch for the thing. I would keep my awareness way more open. I wouldn't focus so heavily. But if we do that, we're going to miss some other aspect. So the nature of seeing is that we focus on something. And as soon as you focus on something, you're going to miss other stuff. And so it's impossible to have no blind spot. There's no such thing as 360 vision. That just cannot exist. And so even if you had 360 degrees vision, you'd have to choose a place to focus your attention. That's just the nature of light. And so we have to come to terms with the fact that we have a blind spot. And the best way to get support to see our blind spot is to work with someone that is getting supported themselves by someone else to see their blind spot. And this is why people sometimes think coaching is like, oh, it's a little bit of a pyramid scheme. Coaches always work with coaches. Yeah, in the same way that like leadership is a bit of a pyramid scheme, because a good leader gets supported by a good leader, and that good leader gets supported by a good leader. My coach has a coach because that allows her to get supported to get off the court so she can support me. Okay, Charlene, I'm going to come to your last one, then I'm going to finish with one last topic we've got here. So you say, when we make judgment on a person as we perceive they are showing up, how do we know what is happening in their world to understand their intent or how they may want to show up? Is our perception right or wrong? Thank you for responding. I'm loving your discussion. Thanks, Charlene. I'm enjoying your conversation and your topics too, your questions. So the best way to know how someone's showing up is to ask them, to get curious. The thing is, from our judgment, we have a hard time being curious because we're like, no, I know why that person cut me off. It's because they're selfish and they care only about themselves and they don't even have any consideration for anyone else and blah, 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 blah. And then that's it. Then we're like, I'm right. That's the end of the conversation. I'm going to let Grimby out of the office. You want to go out, buddy? Let's out there. Okay, get in. Get out there, you little butt. So it's very easy to get clear on how people show up. It's hard to let it in because we form a judgment and then we are right about our judgment, meaning this story I've created is the correct one. So we might even sit down and be like, hey, can you tell me, like, I noticed you cut me off. What was going on? And the person's like, well, yeah, thanks for bringing that up. It's been a hard day. And like, I was just tired and I wanted to get home first. And what we will typically do, as long as we're hanging on to our judgment that we're right about, is we'll hear that and we'll be like, oh, see, yeah, they were tired, sure, but they just wanted to get home first and they had no consideration for anyone else or even the safety of other people. And then we're back in the rightness of our story. So the hard work is to let go of that story. And that's why we work with a coach. Is our perception right or wrong? It's kind of neither, and it's both. we create stories about everything, and we believe our stories are not, we don't hold our stories as a story. Like my beliefs don't occur to me as a belief, they occur as facts about the way the world is. And so from that place, I hold that it's right, and it's right for me, but it's not necessarily right for anyone else. And so this is really tricky for people that come from like a strong theological background, like people with a strong Christian dogmatic upbringing have a real hard time with this, or even people that are really moral or law based. Me, because I was a lawyer before this work, it's like, no, it's objectively wrong to steal from someone. But why? And where is that objective truth? Because if you look in the world around us, if you look in nature, magpies, for example, steal constantly, as do other animals. Theft is continual and constant. Now, we've come together as a race and made a collective agreement. We've said, we're not going to steal from each other. We're going to punish that because we are better for it. But that is something agreed upon. That is not an objective truth in the universe. The universe does not have any requirement. The universe is steal. And from our collective agreement, there are consequences to making the choice to steal. But is it right or wrong? That's a matter of perspective, a perspective most of us share, but it's still not right in the sense that we kind of hold it. So that's the tricky part, is in this work, we're trying to separate off of this, like, I'm right, they're selfish, or I'm right, what they did is wrong and they must be punished, or I'm right, there's a right way to respond to an email and I must do it. And all of that stuff sort of imprisons us. It gets us stuck. Great questions. Thanks, Charlene. Okay, I've got one last thing I want to talk about here. It's going to be Corey's question. Corey asked, he said, in an organizational context, I'm wondering what you think about the importance of interviewing, meeting, talking with team members or stakeholders when coaching leaders. And he brings this question because he had listened to an interview where someone was saying, when you only coach the leader and you don't talk to anyone around them, you're kind of coaching in a vacuum. So I think there's truth. I think there's truth to this for sure. Like, as a coach or someone leading another person, I can only work with what they bring me. So if they show up and they're like, Adam, my boss is a jerk and like yells at me constantly, I have to take them at face value and support them with whatever they want to create from their life, given the facts that they've articulated. So that in that sense, there's like a vacuum. The nice thing about coaching is that it is ongoing. It's a committed relationship. And slowly over time, the truth will find its way out no matter what. So if that person insists, oh, my boss is a jerk, and then they keep showing up and they're like, well, I'm trying to do this, but it all stopped because of my boss, and this, but all because of my boss. And if only not my boss, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to start to get curious about that. I'm going to be like, hey, like, you're really casting your boss as a villain. And I noticed you shared me an email, and I noticed that it doesn't occur like, it actually doesn't seem quite like they're as bad a person. Like, this email they sent is actually quite kind, and it seems like they're actually looking out for you. It seems like there's a disconnect here. What do you make of that? So the truth is going to leach in anyhow, because they're going to bring all of it with them. It's going to show up with them. Sometimes when we interview people around them, we can get a little more awareness a little bit faster, and that can support us to like bring that stuff into the conversation a little bit better. But the trickiness is, again, we're always working with the client where they're at. And so if we're sort of like, well, I talked to your boss and your boss doesn't seem like a jerk, and they're like, my boss is a real jerk, we kind of have to let go of that thing for now, because where the client at is stuck in a belief and an experience that their boss is a jerk. So we have to meet them in that. And as we do that, we're going to start to create an opening, and we're going to start to be able to support the client to become more responsible for how they're showing up and contributing to this. And slowly things will start to shift. But that, you can't shortcut that process because it's your client's process. So I think there's like I think there's a truth and there's a value to things like 360 interviews, to talking to other leaders, other people, peers, whatever. And I think often when people feel like someone's coaching in a vacuum, what they're responding to is coaching that is lacking a particular level of depth. Where if I don't have if I've not done enough of my own work to be able to hold my client with love and rigor and to be able to like ask the probing question and to like hold all of what's happening and start to notice the incongruities, if I don't have any of that, and all I'm doing is showing up and taking my client at face value, and they're like, my boss is a jerk, and I'm like, great, what should we do to make sure you don't have to deal with that jerk? Then I really am coaching in a vacuum. But the truth is, someone brings everything into the space with them. It's all there. We just have to get to a point where we're sensitive enough and open enough that we can let it all in and start to feel it. Having said that, I don't think it's ever a bad thing as coach to talk to the people surrounding those people, but that costs money. My time, your time, it's valuable. And if a company is like, hey, we want you to hire you at our rate, but we want you to conduct a 360 interview with 10 people, we want you to schedule all those meetings, and then we want you to have interviews with everyone 4 hours a month, every month for the first 6 months, I'm going to be like, great, that's going to cost an extra $100,000 because that's a friggin' ton of my time. So I'd probably say it a little less cavalier than that, but it's going to be a helpful way for us to kind of to frame this, to recognize our value. And as we become deeper and more sensitive, we can start to pick up on this stuff from our clients. I think it's great to do it both ways. So you can start I've done both ways, and you start to get a feel like, oh, this becomes a little more available with this approach. This becomes a little more available with this approach. Oh, when I go down this path, I'm trying to push this truth that I believe to be true onto my client. Now I've got an agenda. Okay. So that's my answer to your question, Corey. And I think I've got time for one other thing, which will be what you asked about, Bishal. Bishal asked, can you talk a little bit about one-on-one work, like one-on-one coaching versus group coaching where you're coaching one person and letting the group reflect? So I'll talk about the benefits, and I'll talk about what we end up developing in coaches when we're training leadership. So the benefit in one-on-one work is it's the eye of Sauron is focused on you. There's nowhere to hide. You can't hang out in the group. You can't sit quietly. You're showing up. The coach is saying, what do you want to work on? And you got to generate that. So that's really powerful. And week after week, that light is being shone on you. You're being illuminated and seen and getting supported with that level of focus. That can be amazing. What group work provides that one-on-one work doesn't is the friction of other people. So in one-on-one work, my client shows up and let's use me, and no, let's use my client. One-on-one work, they show up and they practice being in integrity and authentic and intimate and vulnerable with me. Then they have to go into the world and they have to put the rubber to the pavement. They've got to practice with other people. So they're kind of going from this very safe container to the wide, wild, crazy world of the world out there. In group work, they've got a bit of an intermediary. They get to practice showing up intimately and vulnerable with me, but they also get to practice showing up that way with some people that are kind of like not quite as maybe nuanced or artful in their work as myself, but are still engaged in the work. So that can be really powerful because they get the opportunity to have a bit of a halfway step before they go into the world and start practicing around other people. Additionally, in group work, it can be really powerful when you're working on something and you see someone else over there sharing that thing and getting supported with it. Sometimes it's just too close to our face. We can't see it. Whereas in group work, it could be like, oh my God, what Johnny is talking about, that's so relatable to me. I completely get it. That's exactly my stuff. Oh man, I'm really learning a lot about myself from seeing them do their work. So that's kind of the pros and cons. Well, maybe not the cons of group coaching are that you can hide out. Or you can hide out and think that it's not your problem that you're hiding out. You can be like, I'd like to put more of myself in the space, but Reggie over there is always asking the questions and always talking, and he gets all the attention as a result. And we think that's a problem. It's actually an opportunity. The opportunity is for you to stop shutting up, for you to be a demand for the time that you want instead of just complaining about someone else getting it. So there's a consequence, but also a positive opportunity there. The thing that's happening is the thing that's stopping you in your life is showing up in the group coaching, and it's getting in the way there too. There's a beautiful opportunity if you choose to take it on that way. In one-on-one work, you don't have bloody Reggie. Mia knows it. It's always bloody Reggie. Bloody Reggie. He's such a geyser. In one-on-one work, the focus is all there. When we are developing people's ability to lead group work, one of the things that we find happens is that people start to work with a group and then they go in with one person. And what happens is like a few people in that group might be like kind of engaged and watching, but what largely happens is for the person leading, the group fades into the background and they stop seeing them. And so it just becomes one-on-one. And that is less like group coaching and it's more like observation. It's not to say that there's no value there, but what we notice tends to happen is that the leaders lose the group. The group starts to be checked out. They start to get bored. They start to like, okay, I was with this now, but now this feels less for me. I'm going to just multitask. And so some of the things that are really, really important in the development of someone who wants to lead groups is helping them see this in the moment. We do this a lot in the Forge with our leadership team. We're always having them lead group work and then supporting them to work with the group more. It's important to start to like, as you're working with someone, to check in with the group, like who else has this? Will you share something that you're seeing for yourself? Or you've got your hand up too. What can you see? Sometimes we want to be like, what do you think might be the solution that they're stepping around? Okay, and how about you? What would you say might be the solution that you'd offer at this point? So we want to make a point of bringing the group in so that we're keeping the group engaged. And a lot of new coaches haven't been trained in this. And so what group coaching tends to be is like, it's basically less lower value coaching. You know, so it's like, okay, you can work with this coach for one-on-one for 9 months for $10,000, or you can do their group program for $3,000 for 9 months. But in that group program, what's largely going to happen is you're going to observe them coaching someone else for 8 of the months, and you're going to get coached for 1 of the month. And yeah, you can take value from that observation, but a lot gets missed. And so a lot of times there's lacking that kind of training and that capacity to make group coaching as powerful as it can be. Because one of the things I do in my practice is I have one-on-one calls with my clients, but then I also have what are called open calls. And in the open calls, all my clients are there, and then we're kind of creating something in the moment. Sometimes it's one-on-one coaching. Sometimes I'm supporting all of the leaders I work with to like better understand how to coach themselves, or having people like, okay, let's choose a path to follow. What do you think we should do? What do you think we should do? What do you think we should do? Okay, person that's on the hot seat right now, what path do you want to take? What that does is it allows people to get the gift of both parts of that. So there's no right answer to it, but what I think is really important, often gets missed, is that like that drawing the whole group back in. And it's a lot like when you're getting a massage, and a good masseuse, like good RMT, works that one spot in your back, but then they kind of work the whole of your back for a while to sort of like bring all of those muscles back into alignment, and then they go back into that one spot. That's kind of what we're doing in group work. All right, this is a bomb-ass, as advertised. I think I said this was going to be a bomb-ass set of topics, and it totes was. Big thanks to everyone that showed up today. Big thanks to all of our audience that provided topics. If you see that little placard go up on Facebook, put in anything there, anything at all, and I'll riff on it. And I will thank you to the heavens for your support of me. It's such a great way you can support me. Few last minute plugs. If you don't already listen to it, you should definitely listen to the Transformational Leader podcast. I'm going to put a link right here. That's my podcast. I talk for usually 20 to 30 minutes on a leadership topic each week. And then these live shows go on as a midweek episode. So you get all the audio of this. So if it's hard to find the time to come and plug in, or if you're just more of an audio person, all of this is available there. It's an awesome podcast. People love it. I love it. And then we have 3 weeks left until the Forge starts. So if you are intrigued by any of this, if you're kind of like, man, I want to learn leadership, or I want to learn to coach this way, or I want to have a coach in my life, or I want to have an experience of group coaching where it's not just diluted one-on-one work, come do the Forge. It's our program. It runs from September to May. It will completely transform your life. And the retreat that happens in Costa Rica that's included as part of your registration is like the best thing ever. You will absolutely love it. So you can find details there at that link. I love you guys. Have an amazing weekend. Catch you all next week. Peace.